The political decisions people make will affect many lives. Many people see politics as the government and the laws being made. While that is true, it's way more complicated than that.
I don't know what type of procedure is this.
Some of you may be aspiring to positions of leadership in the political arena.
And I accepted full responsibility.
But the question is, why do you want to lead?
It has everything to do with you. Every law that is made will impact many. Sometimes the decisions do affect people negatively. Therefore, it's very important to note that every vote that you cast will either break or make people. Politics with GA brings you the latest political news as well as insight and analysis as we discuss the most important issues that matter. Will the Nigerian National Assembly reconvene or not? The Nigerian National Assembly will not leave the news anytime soon. This is Politics with GA, and I'm Gbenga Aborowa. The All Progressive Congress has called on the Nigerian National Assembly to reconvene without further delay. The party made the call on Friday in a statement by its acting National Publicity Secretary, Mr. Yemi. It asked the legislature to urgently consider the crucial budget of the Independent National Electoral Commission for the general elections. The APC said the sanctity of the nation's electoral system was being threatened by an alleged plot to frustrate the efforts of the executive, particularly INEC, in the run-up to the polls in 2019. But as we have it, members of the House of Representatives Committee on Electoral and Political Matters on Wednesday grilled the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, and other top officials over the budget of the 2019 elections. The INEC chairman was also grilled by the Senate Committee on INEC on the same budget. INEC has proposed to spend a total of 189.2 billion naira to conduct the polls, covering presidential, National Assembly, governorship, and state assemblies elections. Yakubu responded to nearly 30 questions by lawmakers before he lost count of the questions. We spoke with a lawyer, legal practitioner, Liborous Oshoma, on some national issues and more. Thanks for joining us on Politics with GA, Barrister Liborous Oshoma. Benue State government has alleged harassment from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. They froze and unfroze their accounts sometimes last week. And now the governor is raising an alarm that, look, the EFCC claims they're investigating security expenditure of about 22 billion naira. And all the governor's troubles with EFCC came after it defected from the APC to the PDP, but that's the politics of it. Let's look at what the law says on this. Now, the EFCC yesterday was demanding minutes of the Benue State Security Council from officials of the Benue State government. Does the EFCC Act give it such powers to freeze accounts and to, interfere in the internal security affairs of a state?
The EFCC, just like the Nigerian police, unfortunately, you find the EFCC now doing the job of the police. This ought ordinarily to be the job of the police. But because we've relegated the police to what it is today, then you raise a new agency, take some members of the police or some privileged ones, add them to that agency, pay them well, and then empower them to do what they're doing. First, if you look at the Constitution does not recognize the EFCC because as at the time the Constitution was amended, the EFCC had not been created. And so EFCC was created in 2004. And the Constitution was enacted by virtue of Decree 25, decreeing it into existence in 1999. And so the EFCC Act, that is Section 34 or so, subsection 8 or so, empowers the EFCC to freeze accounts if there is suspicion that that account will be used for illegal or fraudulent activities.
But we're talking of the accounts.
The question now is, can a state account be used for fraudulent activities? The answer is a straight no. Also, in that same vein, if you get a judgment against the state government or federal government now, for you to garnish the state account, you need the consent of the Attorney General. That's to tell
how to... At the federal level?
Yes, to protect the state account, because that account It's the lifeline
pensions, salaries,
of the state,
day-to-day running security.
And so if you give EFCC powers to freeze state accounts, EFCC someday can be ambitious and freeze federal account because they share coordinate powers in a federal structure. And so the EFCC should know the limits of their powers by virtue of that section in the EFCC Act. You can only, if you discover that money is being siphoned from the government account to private account, you can freeze these private accounts. You can get a court order to freeze those accounts, to even forfeit those accounts. But can you get a court order to forfeit a state account? You can't. Can somebody steal money and put it inside state account? The answer is no. And so this overzealousness on the part of security operatives, that the moment you are not in the good books of the government of the day, and then they go after you, it should stop. It should be discouraged. Because also, this is most of these state accounts.
But the Constitution is clear, and they're lawyers in this agency. So why do they
you see,
do
the
things
problem
with impunity?
The problem we have in Nigeria, like I told you, is that you leave interpretations to the dictates, whims and caprices of people, depending on the area you support. But if you have attorney generals who are up, in their game, what they do, take matters such as this, you approach the courts or you give an opinion on it. And even though, in any case, even if you give an opinion, people are definitely going to, query such opinion, that the court that must make a pronouncement on it. And I don't think the courts will ask EFCC to freeze a state account. It is not the intent of the drafters of the EFCC Act when they empower the EFCC to trace fund or freeze account temporarily pending investigation when they suspect that account is being used for fraudulent activities or fraudulent funds are being siphoned into such
why
account.
do banks carry out such orders if they know the
because
EFCC doesn't have such
we're
powers?
talking about here, because also a lot of people have not had cause to challenge those orders and sue banks and claim damages. Remember, in the case of Ekiti, the court ruled that the EFCC had powers to freeze individual accounts temporarily. But if it goes beyond a reasonable time, you must approach the court
for extension
or for powers to so freeze pending investigation. But here, because on the basis of that, you find out that they abuse these powers and they become very overzealous. And so you write banks to freeze such accounts. So what I advise the states to do is to sue EFCC and sue the banks and claim damages. So next time, the banks will also want to be careful. They want to tread carefully so that you don't just take steps that will land you in court and you pay damages. EFCC won't help you to pay.
Now,
quickly. On the same Benue, if you remember, the Speaker of Benue State House of Assembly had adjourned sitting. And then, before the governor's defection, and the moment governor defected from the APC to PDP, about 22 lawmakers also defected from the APC to PDP. And those 22 lawmakers now resumed plenary and suspended the Speaker and those other 7 members before the speakers became ambitious and his other colleagues became ambitious and wanted to serve a notice on the governor. If we condemn that action of the 7 lawmakers, we also need to condemn the action of the 22 lawmakers because they do not have the power to reconvene the sitting of the House after it had been adjourned by the Speaker.
Very true. And the Nigeria police yesterday commenced the secret trial of journalist, Premium Times journalist Samuel Ogundipe. They said they charged him with criminal trespass and theft of police document. He declined to name his source. So in the wake of the sacking of the erstwhile Director General of the DSS, Mr. Laudara, he got a copy of the letter, the IG's response to the Vice President. And then the police authorities picked him up and said, you need to name your source. He's a journalist. I believe he has some protection under the Constitution. What is the position of the law on this?
if you read section 13 to section 21 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, it talks about the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policies. You have social objectives, you have political objectives, foreign policy objectives, economic objectives. And then, immediately after section 21, section 22 gave power to the press to hold the government on behalf of the people accountable for implementation of these fundamental objectives. The essence of government is this fundamental objective. That is why every political party must draw its manifestos from section 13 to 21. And that's why the press also is called the fourth realm of the estate. You have the legislature, you have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. The press is to oversee these three arms of government. And that's why also in law you say when a judge sits on trial, the judge is on trial. The judiciary is the voice, is the last hope of the common man. The press is the voice of the common man. And so, even the Seditious Act, the Supreme Court had long nullified those sections that empowers the police to arrest indiscriminately when they feel, oh, some of these stories are not true. The court had pronounced time without number that if you have anything against any publication against you, whether be it government, the best thing is for you to sue for libel. And also, in the case of Anthony Momo, when he was editor of Daily Times newspaper, against the National Assembly, the National Assembly did summon him to come disclose the source of his information. And the Supreme Court expressly stated that you do not have the powers to ask a journalist to disclose the source of his information. And if he decides to disclose, so be it. But otherwise, he can decide not to. It is privilege, their privileged information to him. And so he has a right to protect those sources. But now, what do we see? The same people that rode on the crest of media publicity to get to office are the same people now hounding the press. First and foremost, what you should do when you see such a letter, you look inward. How did this letter get out? And so you look inward and ensure that you plug your loopholes so that such letters will not go out next time, most especially in this era of new media. But to now begin to hound the man who published it, and that letter for me was shameful. It was an embarrassment that the IG of police would append the signature to such letter with so much grammatical errors, and then the conclusion reached. And I think in attempting to cover their shame, the police now had to begin to chase shadows. I wonder if they'll be able to sustain such a charge. Because for you to establish stealing the police document, it's on you. You must prove beyond reasonable doubt. And then, how can I steal a document that is still in your possession?
Criminal trespass of police documents.
How do you, when you say I trespass on a document, you must also be able to establish that I came in contact by virtue of that. With new media, these are difficult to prove. Let's not deceive ourselves. If I take a photograph of you and send to somebody, has that person trespassed on your property? He didn't even get to you. He didn't come to you. So what they should be doing is looking inward. You cannot browbeat the journalist into submission. Rather, you're drawing a line. You're engaging in war with the press, and it will always be difficult for you to sustain. The police need the press more than ever before, especially as we march towards the next general election. The police need the press, most especially with the negative report that the IG has been getting. This is the time for him to create that rapport where there can be synergy between the press and the police and the government also. Also, I listened to the party chairman, APC party chairman, threatening fire and brimstone against the chairman, against China's news. And I was like, you don't do this. Yes, you can go to court if you feel that what was reported, but to begin to intimidate and subtle blackmail, you can't sustain it. And then also I've listened to insinuation, maybe because the wife of China's chairman is related to Saraki. No. So in that vein, can we also now say that Amina Waziri, who is a national commissioner in INEC, being a niece of the president, so INEC will not be fair in the general election? Or that the publicity that China's has been given to Oshomole is because Oshomole's village is close to John Momo's village? Let's be fair in assessing certain. If you feel that you've not been given opportunity, you can write to the media house to say, look, we want to come state our own side of the story. Every media house wants to break a story. That's why they're in business. Yeah. And so you don't ask them, why are you breaking this story? You create a story and then let them break it.
You've rightly said a moment ago that the judiciary is the last hope of the common man. We've witnessed the weaponization of poverty in Nigeria, vote buying. Just last week during the by-elections, we saw gift packs that had onions and all sorts of condiments. And we're approaching 2019. Politicians have been openly boasting about their financial war chest or how we're going to win this. How do you think the judiciary can come in and protect the people, the common man, the downtrodden Nigerian that needs this money but would not be used as a pawn in this political games?
Like we say in court, the court is not Father Christmas. The court can't give you what you didn't ask for. It's only Father Christmas that gives you what you didn't ask for. And then politicians also. But when they give you what you didn't ask for, they'll take so much from you. Yeah. But in this case, the first step should be we, the people, helping ourselves. We should cry out against injustice, irrespective of who is involved. We should look for those people that are Nigerian, that will sell the Nigerian brand, not people who mouth, oh, the division of this country is not negotiable, but they work day and night to ensure that they cannibalize, the country. We should look for bridge builders, people, irrespective of where they are, all they try to make us see is Nigeria first. Because when a car bomber, drove into the fence in London, nobody's talking about blaming Labour or Conservative. It's a crisis. They came together. And so in the same vein here, as we approach the election, first and foremost, INEC admits that there was vote buying across boards. And vote buying being a criminal offense, it is only in this crime that we identify a crime and then we say we are helpless to solving the problem. We are helpless in dealing with the criminal. You identify that both parties, both major political parties, bought votes. And it is a crime. And so you have induced the people. You cancel, you cancel. Use that as a deterrent, to serve as a deterrent. The moment you punish the big ones, the small ones will sit up. But when you say, well, we identify that they've bought votes, but let them go to court to prove it, that is a tall order, because also at the tribunal, I've had courts to handle election petition matters. At the tribunal, the burden of proof is on the man who is alleging irregularities. The moment election results are announced, the presumption is that these results the election was fair. And so you that is disputing the outcome of the election, the burden of proof is on you to prove that the procedures were not followed. And the materials that you need to prove these irregularities are in possession of INEC. So that's one quagmire. That's why it is difficult to upturn election. And so when it happens, like the court sits as an arbiter, listen to this, and on the balance of probability. But in terms of where crimes are committed, it is the duty of the state. It's a crime against the state. It is the duty of the state to charge those that have committed the crime appropriately, like inducement, vote buying. Some people will say, oh, look, vote buying didn't start today. But because we condone it, you allow it to fester. And once it festers, and then you also hear of bribery against judicial officials. And that's why some people will kill to be judges at Election Petition Tribunal. That is so bad that Kayode Esho once said it, that the way we are going, we're gradually creating billionaire judges. That who you will retire tomorrow, or you even dismiss, and then they go home and enjoy their loot and no question asked. So we also, in overhauling the police, you need first and foremost to tell ourselves that if this man gives me onions, and then I vote for him on the basis of that onions, then it means that the next 4 years, will I be getting onions from him? And then also when they say, oh, your vote won't count, don't believe them. Because if your vote will not count, why are they struggling to buy it? Why would they want to buy votes that are not counting? Your vote actually counts if you want it to count. So it's at that level, at that pool, we now make it very easy for the courts to look through it. We make it difficult for people to now approach the court and say, look, we want to upturn election result. And truly, our thumb will speak for us.
Finally, this leads me to my last question. You've sat on electoral tribunals, you've had cases, we've had 20 years of, about 19 years of uninterrupted democratic experience. Beyond 4-year electoral cycles of voting, in what ways do you think we can reform the Electoral Act to reflect the yearnings and aspirations of the people and make it more responsive to the needs of the average Nigerian?
We need to, first and foremost, every time, we need to, I wonder, anytime INEC, after the election, anytime they go on retreat, I wonder what they discuss at that retreat. Because the essence of a retreat is for you to look at the lapses.
Take stock.
Take stock of the election and then find innovative ways of doing it better. We can copy from countries around us how innovative they have improved the electoral process, that you really don't need to shut down the entire country because you are going into an election. You don't need to shut down the state because you are going. The card readers that was introduced, it was an innovative idea to reduce, manipulation, and it has worked. But we left it where it is. Is it not high time we improve on those card readers, that you still have card readers failure almost 6 years after they were introduced?
Inequity.
You still had card readers failure. And that's one. And then secondly, we need to make our election more transparent. We had option A4 and it was fantastic. Why can't we, it was homegrown. Why can't we fashion a way, for similar elections? Now with technology, it is easier. We even have fiber optics now. So it is easier to collate data using, the internet. So what are we doing? But in doing that also, if Americans' elections have been interfered with, we that are not even internet savvy, tech, it means our own can even be manipulated. So in doing that, we need to put proper structures in place and win confidence. We saw the way people believed and in the introduction of card readers and trooped out because they believed that their vote will count. Now you need a situation. INEC is trying to introduce collation. As you're voting, they are collating at the central database also. You need to win the confidence of the people in that. Not you accredit.
But the result sheet still, the physical result sheet still needs to go to.
You see the problem. The problem with those physical result sheets, in most cases, it is not even the result sheets that are written on at the polling unit that are tendered in court. Because in some cases, those ones written at the polling unit are mutilated. In some cases, even some result sheets that we use at the tribunal are not signed by all party agents. And so what does the court do? Yes, they will tell you that they refuse to sign out of protest. And then yet, these documents will be admitted as authentic documents. So we need to also look at the laws in this regard. If election is transparent, you cannot but admit that, yes, what we have seen. But a situation where party agents are distributing food to policemen on election day, they will look the other way when you compromise the system. A situation where party agents buy ballot papers and then ask some people to thumbprint. So you have issues of overvoting. And yet we have still not corrected that issue of overvoting because the Supreme Court had ruled that in looking at in Wike against the state, even what's the name of this other case, that the issue of overvoting, you must juxtapose it with the register and not with the card reader. And so if the number of registered voters is 2,000 on a register, and on the day of election, you have accredited voters on the number of accredited voters by the card reader as hundreds, and then but actual voters you have 1,500. Ordinarily, that would amount to overvoting because the card readers. But the Supreme Court in Wike against the state says no, because the number is still less than the number
2,000 that's
on the voters register, and so it's a problem. So it still leaves room for manipulation. And so we need to now amend the Electoral Act, which is what they are trying to do. But that had been defeated by virtue of Section 25 in the Electoral Act that tries to reorder the election, where the president has said he will not assent to it. So that defeated all of those other beautiful amendments in the Act. So if we do all of this, it's work in progress, and the people need to be involved.
And we shouldn't wait till penultimate year to generate
Exactly. In 2003, you had the Electoral Act as amended in 2002. In 2007 election, you had the Electoral Act as amended in 2006. In 2011, you had the Electoral Act as amended in 2010. You don't need to wait until 1 year to the election before you begin to amend the rules that the players are going to use. So you need to have the law at least a year plus so that people would be abreast of the position of the law in the exercise they are going to participate in.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
Mr. Liborous Oshoma. Thanks for joining us in Politics with GA.
As the second Ebola outbreak spreads across eastern Congo, where ethnic and military conflicts are undermining containment efforts, health workers are checking residents' temperatures in public places and at the entrance to the city, and hospitals have set up mobile labs to test suspected cases. This kind of preparation has become routine in Congo given recurrent outbreaks of the hemorrhagic fever. The virus has already spread to neighboring Ituri province and the number of infected is rising daily. Residents of Goma, a busy trading hub, are taking no chances. There are risks too, as patrons of Goma's popular motorcycle taxis speed helmetlessly across town. Death toll in the current outbreak so far is put at 41. After losing their livelihoods to a devastating mudslide that wiped out entire communities in Freetown, the Sierra Leone capital, 1 year ago, survivors say they are struggling to afford meals and decent accommodation. In the aftermath of the disaster, the government provided temporary accommodation for survivors and gave cash to others who opted to find alternative housing for their families. But despite that intervention, challenges remain. Hundreds of people gathered to pray during a candlelight memorial held for those who died in one of the worst natural disasters to hit the West African nation. Families wept as victims' names were read out during the memorial. International rights group Human Rights Watch (HRW) have called on the Ethiopian government to arrest a rising spate of insecurity in the country. Mariah Barnett, HRW's director for East Africa and the Horn, said ethnically and religiously charged killings, particularly in the Oromia and Somali regional states, were a huge cause for worry. It detailed recent events, especially in Jijjiga, capital of the Somali regional state, where thefts, injuries, looting and burning of public and private properties were reported in the wake of a security standoff between federal and regional forces. In a statement titled "Ethiopia Violence, a Concern Despite Reform Promises," she stressed that the only way Ethiopians could genuinely benefit from Prime Minister Abiy's bold agenda for change was for the killings to be curtailed, investigated, and perpetrators brought to book.
Thanks for watching Politics with GA. See you next time. The political decisions people make will affect many lives. Many people see politics as the government and the laws being made. While that is true, it's way more complicated than that.
I don't know what type of procedure is this.
Some of you may be aspiring to positions of leadership in the political arena.
And I accepted full responsibility.
But the question is, why do you want to lead?
It has everything to do with you. Every law that is made will impact many. Sometimes the decisions do affect people negatively. Therefore, it's very important to note that every vote that you cast will either break or make people. Politics with GA brings you the latest political news as well as insight and analysis as we discuss the most important issues that matter.